There we go. Hey there, folks. Welcome. Greetings and salutations. I hope you're doing well. This is one of these great first time watching experiences with the old Gourd King and me. So hopefully you're in for it. You're going to have a good time hanging us with this.
This was probably my third time
Oh,
watching
hold
it,
on.
going back to it for Jacob Ironside's channel,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
absolutely falling for it. Now rewatching it again for today's show, it's just like it's growing so much in my estimation now.
Yeah, I really have kind of blown away by all that for sure. Well,
Uh,
I don't know what folks heard. So I guess we can just I'll do a brief little recap and we can talk about some things and we'll just kind of go
yeah,
from there. Don't know why we had that issue, but we did.
audio is
So,
being a wee bit
um,
tismy today.
yeah, the audio is definitely being difficult today, and I'm not hearing you in my microphone. Is what my
Oh
problem
gosh,
is. I'm hearing you on the stream, okay,
hmm,
but in my
that's very
microphone, I'm not hearing
strange.
you. We have all sorts of issues today, folks. All right, a little bit of delay on my audio though, so if it seems a little funky, I do apologize, folks. All right. All right, folks. Let's see. Can you guys hear us okay now? I think I hear everything fine, but I'm not sure about you guys out there. Lovely Sherry says she hears us now, but I'm not sure that's up to date with me finagling things. How about you, Gord?
I hear you good.
Okay. I think we're okay. I've lost my sort of audio in the actual stream. So on my audio, I can't hear anything that Gord is saying
No.
until it actually plays out into the wild. So yeah, that'll be fun. All right, Gord. Well, let's just kind of keep going through some stuff here. Let's back up and try to. I mean, I think that the best thing about the opening is the fact that they grab us right away. They're such a great job giving us a battle scene, giving us consequences, setting up him as a master strategist, giving us a lot to go on. And then the film kind of like, okay, now we have to figure out how to survive the sneak attack that we just endured. I think that's it kind of keeps us still on the edge of their seat, but it's pulling us along in a very slow, controlled way. Is that a pretty fair way to describe where we're at?
Yeah. It does all of that. Does all of it very, very well. It kind of gives you, from an outsider's perspective, uh, an understanding of how they might get out of the situation, because they tell you very quickly like the rudder's destroyed, and if you don't know anything about ships, you might think, oh gosh, well I guess they're basically screwed. But then you see like the smaller boats start pulling it into the fog, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is it. It doesn't hold your hand, and yet there's so much detail that you come away with at least a layman's understanding of how such an operation might be conducted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it caught me completely off guard with them being pulled into the fog. Just yeah, once the rudder was blown away, I'm like, oh man, this is great. So it's great that they give you like interesting, like a movie like the dramatic war epic has like twists and turns along the way to keep you in there. And then once they're in the fog, they're gonna have another face off again. And I will say this is just I'm learning who everybody is. I'm feeling very bonded along the way without sort of like being spoon fed anything. Like I really like the fact that we're getting a lot of information as far as, why is the Asheron attacking them? What's who are they? I'm getting information on where they are geographically. So I know they're near the Galapagos. I'm getting information about their relationship, his dynamic with the ship surgeon, played by Paul Bettany, who we both were just loving to death. I don't know if the folks out there were hearing our love for that, but this role for Paul Bettany, I think is top tier. I all right, spoiler alert for a future show, I guess. I haven't seen Beautiful Mind, Gord. Haven't.
Oh,
So guess what? To put that on the list, huh?
yeah. I mean, Beautiful Mind is a really, really good movie, and obviously this that movie also has Russell Crowe in it. It's like it it's one of those movies that you don't necessarily watch over and over again, but can appreciate for its storytelling, and the acting is excellent. But uh, I think this one far supersedes that altogether. And for Paul Bettany, I think this is probably my favorite movie with him in it, and one of his better performances, if not his best performance. He's excellent in this movie. And
Yeah, I
by and
really
one
do agree
and
with all that.
one One quick thing, you touched on the Galapagos Islands thing. This was the first movie to ever be shot in the Galapagos Islands. To actually,
Oh, okay.
yeah, very first one.
I know we're going to get to that part in the story a little bit. I will say that I was really, really enjoying that concept. And with this, that was not what I expected. How this, I literally had this movie sort of pigeonholed as just a naval battle movie, and yet I didn't expect something to be so rich and interesting in its character development. And obviously, you talked about how well it was made, and it's just a beautiful film.
Hmm.
So I will say that's those are two first impressions that I had that uh, really surprised me, if you will.
Yeah, and one thing I think if you're coming in for the first time, you might not expect is the fact that when it's not the dynamic between Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany, one of the more uh, common dynamics we end up seeing is the various men interacting with the young officers, and by young I mean children. This has a couple of prominent roles for child actors, and thankfully both of them are genuinely excellent in their performances. They're really, really great.
I was stunned by that.
Hmm.
I have to be honest. I was stunned that they were children. I was stunned that for some reason in my brain I had children in the cabin and not out actually. I mean, I feel like they would be, raise the flag and watch the deck, but no, no, I'm talking like take up a sword and a gun. Um, yeah, this was I think the Patriot does that, right? So that if you've never seen the Patriot, when you see that, it kind of gives you that Revolutionary War wake up call of what was the role of young men and children. And this is on a completely next level. This this makes that feels like junior varsity.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, this is crazy.
Yeah, it does, because I mean, it's because it's not just the mere fact that these are very, very young people being given responsibilities that include, firing a pistol and using a sword. They are given technical responsibilities that are very mature. They're the kind of things that a lot of modern men in our society would balk at, and they're
Hmm.
learning from a very young age how to do this.
Agreed. Agreed. And very eager to please and entertain and try to find a way to be a part of the the adult class. I mean, I think it's just great. It's a coming of age story, and this is the thing too, where a movie like this can get away with on it because of the epic scale. A lot of the subplots we get, each story arc is so brilliantly done that we don't get that out of some modern movies. Like you have a whole movie and we're like, I don't even know what a story arc is. Like it's just a movie about stuff happening. There's no real character developments and change. This movie is nothing but character development. There's characters just being, and the characters that come out on the other side is, the kids and Russell Crowe's character and Paul Bettany's character and others. Obviously, James D'Arcy's character we haven't even talked about yet. Just brilliant stuff. Just great, great film.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very meditative in that sense, where it's not just. I mean, because there's always this looming threat of this ship, while at the same time they're supposed to chase it. But a lot of this movie is the various tolls it takes on the different men, and both mentally and physically, and uh, things. It kind of keeps you on your toes because you don't always know when something's going to happen, and who's going to be lost as a result, because I mean no one's really safe on this journey outside of Russell Crowe. I mean, because you kind of know, okay, he's got to drive the movie at the very least until the end, but pretty much everybody else you're just kind of like, okay, I don't know who's gonna make it here, so we'll see.
yeah, that's very true because you really just have a great litany of characters that could all be sacrificed at the altar of the story, and you feel like it would all work to change characters and change the story and give you and grab you, and it does a great job. And the way they escape the Acheron, I guess Acheron, is that right? Is Acheron is they use a decoy ship. They kind of like put a little ship out here, put a little light on it, so whenever the other ship attacks, it's actually attacking the decoy, and that allows them to sort of slip away. And they're able to make their way over towards the Galapagos where they can try to do repairs. Because the debate, again, I didn't know this, so I was blown away. I don't know what your first impression versus your impression now is. Repairs at sea in a boat like this, that was crazy for me to watch. I would never have thought that would be a thing. Like, I understand, like, hey, try to stay afloat to get to some land, but not, oh, we're just going to stay at sea. We're not going to, what are you talking about? We're not going home. We're going to stay at sea. That was crazy. I was blown away.
Yeah, I really found that kind of thing fascinating because it's one of those things I've always kind of pondered when, people talk about old school naval battles like this. It's like, okay, so if you've got cannonballs that's ripping through everything and you survive it, what happens after the fact? How do you fix this and that? Do you have to go to port and do all that? And I would assume sometimes you might have to, but really it's just these part of your training is you have to have that on the fly kind of ingenuity. It's like, okay, this part gets buff, you carve it up, maybe you do a little bit of repairs here, paint over it, and there you go. It's weird because it sort of reminded me almost of Mad Max Fury Road, those scenes where you have the Black Thumb characters who would repair the war rig like kind of on the fly. And
True.
granted, that to us in our modern sense is easy enough to grasp because we understand how one might do that with our knowledge of modern mechanics. But this is wood being shattered everywhere, so you're not necessarily intuitive on how they would pull that off. But back then, it was probably just as common for them to think about, oh yeah, okay, if this is blown apart, we'll fix it this way. We've got uh, our various methods to repair this and that. But it's very foreign to us. But I found that stuff really, really interesting. I really liked that.
And I will say, just beyond just the fact we're talking about a wood chip, the water coming in, like, how are you getting the wood and blocking the water, and then figuring out how to they have to use buckets, and they have some sort of equivalent of like a sump pump to pump some water out. I mean, it was just so thought provoking to kind of go down that rabbit hole and try to figure stuff out. So,
Well, and
all right, I'm
one
going
of
to
the other
try.
little details, I really really liked is very early on during the one of the battle sequences where they're bringing men who are injured to the doctor, and you see there's blood on the floors, and obviously with the floors also being wet, it's like, gosh, it's really slippery, and they're like pouring sand on the floor and stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, so that gives them traction and stuff to walk around. It's like all these little
Right.
details to help you understand without fully expressing what their purpose is. It's just kind of intuitively you start to realize what each thing means, and it's like, oh, okay. But again, it could take multiple viewings because there is so much detail like that. But it's really really good.
I agree. I agree. Let me try this one more time here and see what happens. And I don't think. Hail to everyone out there. I can hear you, but let me dip it in and out one more time. Corey's going to try to fix his sound for us, see if that was a problem. Sorry about that, folks. And hail to you, my friend. Across the pond. Look at that. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you being here. Um, yeah, good stuff from India, huh? Cool. I'm actually in the middle of watching an Indian film called Kasari. I think it's a 2013 movie. It's about a Sikh battle, a real life event I didn't know much about. It was recommended to me. So, but as you can see from these stills, this is from over on IMDb. Just absolutely beautiful film. Truly spectacular, especially for 2003. This is really just a beautiful film. I would assume they would probably still have aspirations of trying to make more films from the novels, but for some reason, with the finances and things like that, I don't know. I worry it's just going to be all done with CGI and stuff. This is just so incredible when these shots are played out like this. I'll wait for Gord to come back. I don't know how much is Evie Mux giving me problems and how much is just life. Well, let me say this. So my first thing is, this first half of well, it wasn't even half. It's like all of that we talked about. It's only like the first 30 to 40 minutes, to be honest. And then they basically are going to go to the Galapagos, and there's the discussion of the crew amongst themselves. They're drinking, they're talking. You're learning interpersonal relationships and some dynamics. The journey is very tedious and long, and they're out in the sun. So there's sort of like they feel cursed because there's no wind. And now they start to kind of blame this one character. and it becomes kind of a plot point for later on. I hate the fact that they would put in these sort of like press shots right in the middle of their photos from their movie. It's so silly to me. So that's what all that is. That's from the screenings. But the idea that they just show the fact that at sea like this, the person would just be exasperated. They don't know what to do. And the person quotes from the Bible, and you start to get into this sort of concept of a cursed crewman would be to blame for some of this. I don't know. It wasn't something I expected to have happened, and yet I'm so grateful that they did, because it really kind of I will say it slowed the movie down for me, and it did kind of make it feel a little tedious at times, but I enjoyed what I got out of all that, if that makes sense. So I thought that part felt pretty tedious, but then they make their way to the Galapagos, and that's when you start seeing some island. You start to see the images of like the iguana and some different birds, and that's when you have the accidental shooting of the doctor himself, which I think was, I mean, I didn't see that coming. That was pretty crazy. So 2019 movie. Okay, that's the Kasari movie. Yeah, I got you. Cool. Yeah, new for me, brother. I'm trying to give it a shot. So Gord can hear me, but I cannot hear Gord. I don't think you guys can hear Gord either. So Gord, if you say things, I'll see if it goes through the stream and not my earbuds. But I try to unplug and plug back in. Don't know why we're having issues, but oh, there he is. Hey, everybody's back.
Good,
Hi, Gord.
good.
Welcome back.
I'm good. I came back in. I saw you. It sounded like you were talking about the Jonah thing they had going on.
Yeah, they did a little Jonah thing for a minute. Yeah, that was interesting for me. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the fact, but I will say I felt the film gets a little tedious for me in that middle, which I think you're supposed to experience because it's in line with the characters and the journey that they're on as well, which is totally fine. But that was how I was feeling. Just being fully transparent with how I felt about everything.
Yeah, I know in that in those moments, like you hear Russell Crowe's character says that they are going through a really bad string of luck, which is very much in contrast to how they know him. I mean, literally, his nickname is Lucky Jack. So there's obviously concerns about losing the crew on this, and they're all getting fatigued, and they're not getting rain and stuff like that. And they start to kind of pin it on the person who spotted the Acheron first, because he, refused to do what needed to be done very quickly. He had to have a decision made for him. He's tried to endear himself too much to the men without actually being a commanding officer. So they just start to look at him as the Jonah, which, if you're unfamiliar with the element of that story that they're talking about, Jonah, when he refused to do what God wanted, the ship that Jonah was a part of was pretty badly inflicted with like weather and stuff like that. And really, it wasn't until Jonah kind of gave himself up that uh, the ship was okay again. That's so basically, whenever things start going wrong, oftentimes somebody is almost kind of, the impression you get is that someone gets kind of looked at as a Jonah. They're like, okay, what's the source for all of this trouble? And they kind of go back to the beginning and they're like, it's this guy. He's the issue, because he can't act like a commanding officer the way he's supposed to. Every time he's on watch, this thing pops up. So yeah, he kind of becomes the scapegoat, basically.
Yeah, I really. Oh, geez, what happened? Oh, okay, I see. Never mind. I like the fact that it gave me something else that I hadn't really thought about, but I felt like there was so much action, so much intensity, and I get it. Like, it's going to age well because I'm on the journey with the characters. It's going to age well when I watch it again, but because I understand how things are going to pick back up again and what's going to happen. But in the moment, I was like, wait, why are we slowing down like this? And then the Galapagos thing was interesting because you're getting like a little tease, right? They're seeing what's on shore. There's some birds. There's some different elements that are sort of like put out there, but then it's like, wait, we're not going to do that. So I will say I was enjoying kind of the back and forth because I feel like this is the age of scientist discovery, right? This is this era,
Mm-hmm.
and this, doctor who's it's funny how as a in our time as a medical doctor, you would not think of him this way. You think, well, as a medical doctor, he's not a exploring scientist or whatever. And so the fact that that part was all melded together really well was really interesting for me. I really enjoyed all that. I know that may not have been the focus of the movie in some ways, but it's this character, Paul Bettany's character, is really brought to life because of all that. And I mentioned briefly that it's during this phase where there's like an albatross that flies out near the ship. And that's when he accidentally gets shot.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
we
it's.
transition into just a crazy, crazy sequence.
I would say also what's interesting is when you rewatch this, you start to pick up on how a lot of the things that happen on the Galapagos Islands in their own small ways kind of mirror what's happening on the sea. Like Paul Bettany's character, like he kind of is also a naturalist. He likes to, examine and catalog like various other animals, and there's a lot of focus on this flightless bird that he spots from afar, and he very much wants to examine this thing. He wants to catch this thing, and the first time it's like he's thinking they're going to be on the Galapagos for several days, and he's really
Right.
upset when that promise is not fulfilled. But uh, one of the younger officers comes to him and he gives him this beetle and he says, you wouldn't have found this thing otherwise, so you can at least look to this. And he's like, okay,
Yep.
like it seems at first this is this small compensation, but then it pays off in a different way later on. So it's interesting how that gets used as a kind of form of symbology. I thought that was really interesting. It's kind of his own little journey where he's trying to catch something as well. But
Yeah,
it's a good way to highlight the difference between these two characters.
he never comes across as a man that's trying to make a name for himself.
Hmm.
Sometimes the scientists of this era, it's come across as sort of like, I don't want to say, the greedy scientist that wants to go back to London and have, they're going to be famous and their name is going to be called, the gourd beetle or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like that. That is sort of the presentation that we get in a lot of other entertainment. And here you just see a man of curiosity and a man of just awe and wonder of the creations that are around them. And I thought that was it's all really done. And then to know that it has like a weird sort of like, twist to everything with the way they are going to um, have him get shot was like, okay, holy cow, we're going to lose this character now. Like I'm getting attached. I'm getting attached. Like, oh, and then he's just there pale and on death's door. And I guess he's the assistant doctor, assistant medical. I don't know the terminology if it was dropped in the film or not. He's basically the second medical officer who like, well, I can do my best, but it's probably better if we try to get me to dry land so I'm not rocking and bobbing in the water. So,
Yeah,
you know,
he's very much his second is very much out of his league. One other little thing I did want to touch on with like the thing with the Galapagos, an
uh-huh,
interesting parallel between them that I really only caught on to the third time was how, because if you when they decide to pull out very quickly and he doesn't even get to walk the island, Paul Bettany's character is very upset by this. And on the one hand, from the outside, you're like, well, dude, calm down. This isn't your mission. Your mission is
right.
not to explore this place. You all have got your orders and whatnot. But at the same time, you find out that Captain Jack has long exceeded his orders. He doesn't necessarily need to be going after this thing. So it's this interesting dynamic where both of them are doing or wanting to do something that they don't necessarily have to do, and in their own separate ways are costly. But yeah, they create this really interesting parallel between these two with these very different things. I mean, it's like being an explorer on an island versus being the
Mm,
commander of a ship sounds so diametrically different and diametrically opposed, but they create a lot of interesting similarities with those.
that's really that's really a lot of rich insight too, because for me it was just the fact that he could have headed home for the repair, and instead he's going after the Asheron because he feels like he's the best chance against this thing sneaking up on other vessels, and that was
Hmm.
the only part I got. So you were laying a lot more depth to that than I originally picked up on. So that was really really good. Thank you for that. it's really done in a way that just makes me enjoy the characters. Like, I get it. I get,
Hmm.
and then of course, then it turns, crazy when it's like, oh, what are we gonna do with this poor guy? He's gonna die. So they're like, we're gonna build this little and you see, just again, Peter Weir does such a great job of giving us some information, but not like he's not boring us, right? It doesn't become like a 3 hour tedious fest. It's like, okay, you briefly have a shot of them putting up this little makeshift tent where they're going to do surgery. You're going to have these quick little shots of the tools rolling out of, this is what they use. So good luck trying to survive with these kind of archaic tools that they're using on you. Um, it,
Yeah,
it
and it's weird also because they or interesting also because well, and one thing that Peter Weir does so well is he knows how to deliver exposition that doesn't sound like exposition. It sounds very natural, very true to the characters. And one of the things I loved during the scene where he's having to do his self surgery is, he's asking Jack to, assist, and he's like, do you think you can do this? And Jack's like, yep, I've been around injuries for a really long time. I mean, but you can tell he's very nervous because this is just dealing with injuries in a much more personal way than he's used to. He usually, as captain, he's dealt with injuries kind of passively, where he's been there to try to encourage the men, but then he gets to walk away. Here, he's got to be face to face with it and with somebody he's very very close to, uh, and you can tell it's like this is something he's very much a little this is he's a little out of his depth. It's like he does what he has to do, but he's very uncomfortable watching his friend base because he's basically digging the bullet and the piece of shirt out of himself while one man is lifting up his rib and him just doing it with the mirror held up. It's pretty intense. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, I will say that I had a little bit of the, oh really phase. Like, I wasn't totally I like the fact that they didn't show a lot. So I'm gonna say that. First and foremost, the thing that really it's sort of off camera. I was expecting for blood to splatter on Russell Crowe's character at one point. I thought Jack's just he's gonna get squeamish maybe, or I uh really had, I think, a pretty good approach to, yeah, I don't know, man. You would probably go into shock in this time. There's no anesthesia. He's not even getting boozed up or anything like that. I would assume you'd probably just go into shock. But it was fun. It was good. It was really a great, great, great story, man. Really great story. The idea that you're going to have such a surgeon who's so ridiculously talented that he can just somehow um, pull this thing out of himself like this.
Yeah.
This
Well, and
was.
they don't do it in a way that I think like because if you made it to where he made this look too easy or like he composed himself too well, it wouldn't land. Like, but and this really helps. This really is caught well with the subtitles and whatnot. Like when he gets the thing out, like even he's just like, oh, thank God I got it out. Like because he kind of recognizes this is about as dire as it gets, and this is just it's kind of one of those instances where you could almost draw a parallel between him and the way the men have to take care of the ship in dire situations is, if you need to do a makeshift quick repair or come up with a rare solution, that's what you kind of are stuck having to do. He's having to do the same thing, but literally on himself because there's really no one else qualified to do this for him. But it's
Mm,
life or death.
okay.
It's life or death.
Yeah, I was expecting. So again, just pure speculation of what was going to happen. Thing. My brain was debating whether or not he was just going to pass out. Like, he was going to get the bullet out, the piece. He's going to get it out, and then he was just going to collapse. Like, that was it. And then the second in command medical guy wasn't even going to be able to do his job. It was going to be Russell Crowe's character actually putting in the final stitches. It's kind of what I expected, like the actual shoot. So it moves along fine, and I will say it does feel a little uneven for the normies. Like, I can see why a movie like this may not have had legs at a box office for rewatchability, because it's got a great sequence early on and an incredible sequence at the end, but this middle is not necessarily for everyone, and I can feel that you have to kind of chew on it a little bit. You kind of have to really kind of understand how they're growing characters on you. They're setting things up for later. And just look, I'm not, and again, I'm not complaining. I think I'm trying to be as fair as I can to uh, the lower box office numbers, or way it maybe doesn't have the legacy that we might like as sort of uber film nerds. But yeah,
Yeah, this is I would definitely say this particular portion of the movie is it's for the rewatch because and it is the one that is very much helped along by subtitles. Like this is one of the few movies I would probably recommend just about anybody watch with subtitles because there is so much happening in the dialogue and I kind of find that reading the dialogue helps you start to see like various parallels and various like methods of storytelling that draw out various themes and whatnot. But again, for if for no other reason, just for the amount of detail and the technicality of it, because it's a movie that if you don't that you could easily get lost in the weeds with on a mental level, and it might make it feel a bit dull outside of the battle and chase scenes. But if you if you have those subtitles going and you're reading what's happening, it does make it significantly more interesting, and you start to see and appreciate uh, the crafting of the film a lot better.
I will say I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on. There's no real image to pull up with this one, folks. So the character early on, that he's the hesitant officer. He's the one they think is a curse, has been
Mm,
cursed, and then they disrespect him, and it creates a flogging for one of the young men, which is kind of distasteful in a lot of ways, right? This is kind of the whole point. There's a big back and forth between the captain and the doctor over that,
hmm.
and then ultimately he just decides to just jump himself overboard, and that's heavy, man. That's pretty good stuff. That was pretty heavy. I liked it. I can see though that would be shocking. Like that was pretty rough.
Yeah, and it's one of those moments like because there's two because I mean there are like several moments where various men die and whatnot, but there's three like character deaths in this, and each one is harrowing in their own way. Early in the movie, you have the part where part of their ship falls over, and one of the men, his friend, goes overboard, and they're telling him, swim to the wreckage, and then we can pull you forward. And then within about a minute of that suggestion, and with everyone saying he's going to make it, he's going to make it, he's because he's very much making progress. One of Russell Crowe's men tells him, this thing's weighing us down. We have to cut it loose or it's going to sink the ship. So literally, they're watching this guy swim towards what he thinks will save his life, but they're having to cut him free because it's the lesser of two evils. And then you get to the second character death where this man has been kind of scapegoated as the Jonah of the ship, and that he's the kind of supernatural reason why they're having such a run of bad luck as ever since he failed in his duties and has failed and he is the movie is pretty clear. The guy has not gone over well with the men as a potential officer. He's failed to be a lieutenant a couple of other times, and it's just he's not made for command. It's he wants to endear himself to the men. He wants to share in the camaraderie, whereas because he's supposed to be in a position of authority, they don't respect him. And there's a couple of little touches before you get to him being kind of accused of a Jonah that start to signify this. But yeah, once they start scapegoating him, the mental toll it takes is pretty rough to watch because like there's a part of you that feels very sympathetic towards him because on the one hand you're like, yeah, maybe he isn't the best person for this and he's a bit weak in that sense, but at the same time you're like, gosh, he's the whole weight of what's going on and all the misery these people are going through, it is all being placed on his shoulders, and it ultimately drives him to where he's like, well, okay, he just picks up a cannonball and he jumps overboard, and that's that. He's just
Yeah, it was.
in the scene where
It,
he's sinking and just looking up. It's like, oh
it
man,
was heartbreaking. Yeah, it was so
yeah,
intense. And again, there's so much gravitas with that, with having the movie make you start thinking about life and the times and the experience of it all. I really loved it. Really did enjoy it. The story kind of moves quickly to focus on the doctor a little bit. He kind of gets his dream to be able to go out onto the island a little bit. Like, hey, we're just gonna hang out here for a minute. We're gonna work on the ship. You're gonna recover, and you can go walk the island a little bit if you want. And that's kind of what he does. And lo and behold, he goes for the hike on the other side. He's exploring. He's looking for this, looking for that bird, and he
Mhm.
sees the Acheron. Acheron is on the other side. There it is, right there.
And one thing I loved, like one of my favorite little touches, is he goes right after that bird who he spots, and then when he gets there, it's just gone, and he finds the beetle again that he was
Hmm.
given earlier. And when he unfurls his hand and looks at it, he looks over, and that's when he sees the ship as well. So there's this nice little coming together of these little elements, and it's like of all people, he's the one who spots it. I was like, that's really cool. And then of course he's forced to he's because he's got all these various animals and cages and whatnot where he's got them, and he's got all these things he wants to study, and he has to like shed all of that because they have to carry him back because the hike is like 10 miles to the other side of the island. So it's like, oh gosh, we got to hike another 10 miles back to
Yeah.
let our
And these
captain
are like
know
these
it's here.
giant. He has like they have like one of the giant tortoises, so a giant Galapagos tortoise, and all these other different animals in these makeshift crates that they're going to try to get back to the ship, and they can use for research and museums and everything else. The exploration of it all, and no, it has to all be abandoned just so they can even physically, because he's barely lumbering around. He's recovering from his surgery,
Hmm.
which again, um, my suspension of disbelief, my normie radar, all of that. This is one of those things. It's going to hold up better in my rewatch experiences than my first watch experience. Um, but we get there, and that's all that matters. We get there. We have a good journey, good character, and yeah, really liked it. Good stuff.
Yeah. And
Uh,
also it's I love also how they now, granted, this as far as like the various parallels they draw between these two men and the two things that they're into, the naturalism and the ship captaining. This is probably the most overt parallel they draw is when he's showing him some of the stuff they were able to keep or to catalog, and he shows him this picture that at first he's like, "Oh, it's a stick." He goes, "Well, no, it's actually it's an insect that disguises itself as a stick," and it gives him the idea to turn their ship into something else to disguise it. And like he even says, I'm going to start taking a little bit more of an interest in what you do from now on. Who would have thought that your naturalism would advance naval warfare the
that's a
way it
great
is?
line, great moment. Lots of good bonding there,
Hmm.
and again, another twist for an otherwise film that I would not have thought of that way. I was very pleased about that. I was very interested to see how that was going to navigate through. And then, of course, they disguised themselves as a whaling ship, which
Which,
was
by the way,
all.
it's worth noting that earlier in the movie, since I don't think we've touched on this, that they did. I think it was on their first trip through the Galapagos. They ran into a whaler who was telling them about him getting caught. Like this is what ends up causing them at first to leave, much to Paul Bettany's characters, uh, to his chagrin. But they ran into a whaler, and he's on the ship with them. And one of the things they say is that if we can get aboard this vessel where you want to release the whalers because they're caught on this ship and everything, and they'll help them. So
Okay. Okay.
that's one thing that I know I missed the first two times because I was like, I remembered them catching up with and talking to the whaler. I didn't quite catch that was actually quite important to them overtaking the French vessel.
Well, I knew because they did here. They're taking in the whalers that were,
Hmm.
and I was like, okay, well, okay, what are we doing? How did they have all these? I don't want to say costumes. How they have these other uniforms and how they? So I guess I'm glad you kind of gave me a little bit of context. I guess in the early half of the movie, I would be able to pick up some of the breadcrumbs a little bit better. It felt just too convenient at the time, but I will say it also lent itself to a little bit of confusion. Like they do. Peter Weir does a good job, like you said. He does a great job of giving me the exposition without making me beat over the head with it. But I won't lie and say I wasn't a little bit confused on what we were doing.
Yeah,
Like I was,
it's
yeah.
definitely one of those things where you really have to be paying attention and because like when they're preparing for how they're going to fight this French ship here with the at the climax, it's very much almost an offhand line where he looks through the guy. Number one, you would have to recognize amongst a large group of men who the whaler was. You'd have to remember, okay, that's the whaler guy. And he's saying, hey, when we get aboard, release the whalers. So these are details you would have to remember that have only been mentioned once at this point. So yeah, it's one of those things you can very easily miss amidst all the other details this film has.
Yeah. Well, I will say though, folks, it makes it worthwhile though. The sneak works. They set their boat. They look at they literally do everything. They have a little fire. He's giving them a great pep talk. They just kind of they get the bait. They put the bait out there, and this ship comes for the bait, and you end up with this incredible final sequence.
Oh yeah.
Not only ship versus ship, but it becomes hand versus hand. But you have 2 or 3 different groups that are attacking and also boarding the ship. So all the different characters are, coming to their own. They're either going to make it, they're not going to make it. They're going to step up with their elements of bravery and sacrifice. And it was truly remarkable. I had to be honest. I've watched that I've watched from like this point on, well, not this part, but where they come aboard the ship. I've watched that twice. I rewound it and watched it again because I wanted to make sure I could try to get, because there's so much happening, man.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
overwhelmed. I was like, wait, what is happening? Brilliant stuff though. Beautiful shots.
It's pretty remarkable. Like, cause yeah, this is a PG-13 movie, and yet this battle sequence is incredibly intense. I mean, it does not pull punches despite its rating.
Yeah, it is. It is something special to see so much happening and trying to keep it all straight. And yet I realized how well he was doing with that. Again, when I watched it the second time, I was realizing how great he was doing at giving me little moments. And some of the shots are just, I have to be honest, they're so unorthodox with how he was framing things and moving the camera around. And there are shots where you don't even see the face. You know what's going on, but you don't even have. I mean, it's just really, really great stuff, man.
And for such a chaotic battle, it's not difficult to follow necessarily. Like I mean, the progression is easy enough to follow. It's just there is so much going on that it is worth rewinding, because it's like it's a battle that probably, I think it almost feels longer than it really is. But because so much tends to happen, but it's just like once something happens, like, okay, now move on to the next thing. Now move on to the next thing. It's not necessarily that it's quick cutting. It's just, it's giving you just enough to know this just happened. This just happened. This just happened. But yeah, and it's very, very intense. It's very intense because you have people getting stabbed, and you have cannons being shot, and you have guns being fired. It's just the various manners by which these men have to fight each other. You're like, gosh, that must have been brutal.
It's remarkable there's anyone left standing. Like, it really, I think our heads can get around the fact that we have like these face-off battles from, the Viking era through Revolutionary War and things like that. This is on a boat, guys. This was done so well to work it out. Yeah. Crazy.
And the amount of courage you would have to do it to do, because it's early, there's not cover here. You're just having to, like, the goal is move forward, just keep moving forward, and it's like you're putting yourself right in the line of fire, or right in the path of people with swords and whatnot. It's just like, you just have to march straight into it, and it's
they're just a few feet away from you, or they're right next to you. It's just, it was crazy. Pat S chiming in. Hey, Pat. Did you know that USAID gave $120,000 to Uganda to show this movie to trans cows in public reserves? Huh.
Well, there you go.
Wow. That's where interesting to know. That's where the money went. I got to be, Pat, at this point, wouldn't be surprised.
That's where our milk gets its trans fats.
There you go. Well, thank you, Gord. Very good. The lead's flying. Yeah, I cannot imagine how you survive. I mean, so pieces of the ship is exploding. There's cannon fodder. There's gunfire. There's swords. There's people being thrown, right, from explosions and other things that I was like, I don't know how anyone's left standing. So
Yeah.
the fact that we get to the end of the film and it's like, oh, he reads off a few of the dead, and you're like, yeah, where's the other? I don't know, 100 names, because there's gotta be. It was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, remarkable film, remarkable film. It was. I'm so glad that you kind of put this on the list for me, of some of the ones I threw out there, because I know I've only heard good things about this movie. I've never heard anything bad about it, and maybe just subconsciously, you miss the first go around. You look at the box, you look at the marketing, you're like, that's a naval battle movie kind of thing, or it's just a more of a historical drama. Maybe is how you feel, and sure, it has the dramatic element in the middle. But the beginning and the end are these incredible naval action sequences that don't get the kind of credit that they deserve, in my opinion, for sure.
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways it almost feels like it's something out of a bygone era because you really don't see movies made like this anymore where there's this kind of attention to detail, there's this kind of effort put in to make it all seem much more authentic. And it's the kind of thing that you almost would wonder if it would do better in a time period like now because it's so rare. Whereas back then, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, that's all pretty cool. But it's almost like you would take it for granted because there were other movies that in their own ways would have this level of detail, but it was almost a little bit more expected because CGI wasn't quite as prominent as it became. But yeah, this is man, it's this is gonna age so much better than a lot of the junk that we have now, and, thankfully, it also happens to be very well written and contain a lot of interesting characters. There's actually some pretty good humor in this that's, fun to pick up on, but, yeah, it's just top to bottom, the more I watch this, the more I love and appreciate this movie.
Okay, it did win. It did win an Oscar for best cinematography, so I was a little worried about that because I was like, oh, I don't think. Yeah,
Yeah, it won.
they didn't nominate The Lord of the Rings that year for that one. Cinematography wouldn't have been. So that makes sense. Okay, so
Yeah, it also won, for sound mixing or sound
uh,
design, I think. I
sound
know it
editing, yeah,
yeah,
sound
it won
editing,
Yeah, it won 2 Oscars that Return of the King wasn't nominated for. Because if you remember
correct.
that year, Return of the King won all 11 categories that it was nominated in, so the only chance that Master and Commander had was categories that that movie wasn't nominated in.
And the irony is, they didn't nominate it for best supporting actor.
Yeah,
Paul
I
Bettany
mean,
did
it
not even get a nod. A nod. That's crazy. I haven't even
no
heard of.
acting no acting nominations
Right.
for it.
One of the Oscar films that was nominated for Best Supporting Actor is Alec Baldwin in a film called The Cooler. I don't
Yeah,
even know what The Cooler is. Have you heard of this movie?
I
William
know
H.
of it.
Macy is in it?
Yeah, I know it's, I think it's like a kind it's about I think a cooler is somebody who comes to, like, a betting table of some kind, and he's supposed
Hmm.
to, uh, I guess if somebody's winning a lot, they're supposed to make things intentionally worse or something. I remember the movie from its time, but yeah, it's one of those films where I'm like, it kinda came and went for me. I don't hear really anybody talk about it anymore. I do remember there being some buzz around his performance. He might have even won, like, the Golden Globe that year
Hmm.
for that same movie, but,
Wow. I
uh
don't even know what that is. The other movies I'm familiar with, obviously Clint Eastwood's Mystic River had Tim Robbins, and that's what
sure.
won the award. That makes sense. Last Samurai, Ken Watanabe was
Mhm.
nominated for Last Samurai. That also makes sense. Everything else, I'm like, I mean, Del Toro, Benicio del Toro, and 21 Grams is fine, but Paul Bettany didn't get a nomination. It's pretty criminal. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd
Like,
still like.
I'll say this, In America, the one where, Jijimon Hensu was nominated, I know nothing about that film.
Yeah, don't know anything about that
I
either.
don't think I've even really heard of it, so I'm like, I have
Right.
no idea if it's a worthwhile film to have been nominated. No idea.
Yeah. All right, Gord. I'll let you discuss. I'm going to say this for me was a very solid 4 out of 5. Strong start. I feel like this is exactly what you had said,
Mhm.
offline, and now this. As you watch this movie, it's going to age better for you because you're going to pick up on more details. I'll better know who different characters are. The chaos will be sorted out for me. I'll pick up on all the setups and callbacks and allegories, and I'll get so much more of that as I rewatch a movie like this, which is so rich with that, which you want out of an epic. And then I also know there's a big payoff at the end of the movie. So that middle that has a little bit of a lag for me won't feel as dramatically laggy as it was when I was watching it in real time. So yeah, good. Very solid.
Yeah, it's funny because that was probably the rating I would have given this movie on my first watch was 4 to 5, 8 out of 10.
Yep.
Depending on how you do your fractions. But
Yep.
rewatches have enhanced this to where I would at minimum give it a 9.5 out of 10.
Wow.
I know I'm at the very least at that point. It might even be a 10. It's just I guess the next thing I would want to do watching it is follow the script and the progression of the cause and effect of the movie and see how strong that is. But thus far, from what I've followed, I can't find a ton wrong with the movie. So it's at the very least borderline a masterpiece, but genuinely might be one.
Yeah, I got you. I can see myself easily getting the other point, easily getting to a 9, because I feel like I'm going to watch and I'm going to pick up on the pieces. And like I said, that middle won't feel as heavy as it felt watching it. The gap between there and the top, I don't know. We'll see. But no, good stuff. And definitely way better than I even expected. Even when we chose it, even with some of the buzz, I was like, we'll see. And no, that opening sequence got me on a hook, and that ending sequence just made me happy and want to watch it again. And I did. I watched the final sequence twice to better understand where everybody was and all the stuff. So, and great performances that don't get credit. Like the little boy was phenomenal. Like it just felt like going to be a lagger on type character early in the movie, and you're like, nope, he's super cool, super relevant, super good story. James D'Arcy characters feels like the forgotten character, some other character, and you're like, nope, good story, good setup. Yeah, Mark, man, for sure. If you get a chance, give it a go. It's a little bit long, but it's got payoffs, man. It's good movie, really solid film, and I regret not seeing it sooner. And I'm going to look for a way to get a hold of this one for sure down the road. So
it's funny in kind of our modern day of lacking movies that are genuinely masculine. This is a highly masculine film.
Well, they don't like water it down. We don't have a bunch of random African American and Mexicans aboard the ship for no reason at all. Like it feels very well researched and historically, I won't say accurate, but they're trying to really give you some real life things to think about what life would have been like surviving. Phenomenal job. Peter Weir. Yeah. It's sad that it lives in the shadow of Return of the King. This is the sadness of this era, when you get to the 90s and into the early 2000s, where so many movies came out at the exact same year and don't get credit. Well, one of them won, one of them didn't. Again, so and then we ended up with like this lull of different years where there's just nothing that can't hang my hat on hardly anything. It's so rough. And then the last few years, it's just been abysmal in my opinion. It's so few and far between sometimes. I don't know what. I know you and I should do a show just on what makes it out of the decade, what makes us out of the last 5 years for sure. I don't know what makes the list.
It's interesting because it's not even just that this lives in the shadow of like Return of the King. If you look at like the movies that were nominated for Best Picture that particular year, this is maybe the fourth or fifth most regarded movie from that year at best, and that might even be generous. And that's just amongst the the Oscar nominees, because I mean, Mystic River, most people could tell you about that movie. Most people could tell you about Lost in Translation. I would say this movie's probably aged a little bit better than maybe Seabiscuit has amidst all the Best Picture nominees. But like Pirates of the Caribbean came out that year, and that's everybody knows that film. I even think
for sure.
Monster gets talked about more than this, and this movie I think is way better than Monster. But it's
this is definitely a way better crafted movie than most of those movies that you're talking about. I mean, Mystic River's fine. I haven't watched Mystic River in forever. That's probably one I should rewatch.
I watched that movie one time and never went back to it.
Yeah, same thing with Lost in Translation. I've watched them once. I have no aversion to watching them again, but they're not like this is a rewatchable movie. The rewatchability factor on Master and Commander is very, very high. Even if you're going to jump over some of the middle just because, you know what I mean? But I found Seabiscuit to be rewatchable. I don't know that I've watched Seabiscuit with my wife way more than I have
Mm,
watched Mystic River. Again, no offense to Mystic
interesting.
River, but she just enjoys the movie. I'm fine with its nuances and creative liberties. It's fine. But yeah, the ones we mentioned, Pirates of the Caribbean, is probably the most rewatched of the group. Like it's that and Return of the King are these two that have
Hmm.
they're in that you know lexicon. They're in the the bigger
You could
category, if you will.
you could honestly argue Pirates of the Caribbean is the reason why this movie got left in the shadows because it was two seafaring movies, and that one
Oh,
was
that's true.
that one
That's
was
true.
fun and had the lighthearted performances, had the huge box office performance, whereas this was more the artful, serious
Yeah,
film.
good point.
So yeah, it's
That definitely would be a big hindrance on the box office as well. Some folks were like, "What are you talking about? I'm not going to sit." So yeah, all right. Well, good stuff, Gord. Good stuff,
mhm,
Gord. We get to go the opposite direction next week. We did do one you've never seen.
yeah.
George C. Scott in Patton.
Hmm.
This one is this one is so intense. They actually a lot of folks will almost call it like docudrama category. They try to like really, really get in the weeds with you on some real life Patton stuff. So be interested to see what you think and how you feel about that, how that translates from 1970. That's right, 50 years, folks.
Yeah.
Um, I have a hard time with between 1970 and 1973, other than the Godfather movies, what is like the elite class of films in those couple years. And it's kind of a tough thing. Maybe not 73, because 73 might be the Sting. I think 73. I get 73 and 74 mixed up on a couple of those films, but definitely 71, 70, 71, and 72, other than that Godfathers. It's like, what is like the elite? Again, I go back to what's the most rewatchable, what does everybody still talk about, blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Yeah.
well,
70
Patton is one of those.
71 was solid. It had like Dirty Harry and The French Connection and Willy Wonka. Clockwork
Yeah,
Orange
Willy
was that
Wonka
year,
for
although
sure.
that's kind of niche. But yeah, that one was a little more solid. But yeah, then you get 72, and it's just like The Godfather. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. 70 was like the biggest movie was Love Story. And I'm like, I'm not rewatching Love Story. Like, I get it. I know what it was for its time, but no, no thanks. I'm not doing that. So, yeah, we'll do a Patton next week. We'll see how that goes and get your perspective and a little different angle on your first experience watching that movie. And folks out there, again, apologies for any of the technical issues along the way. Yeah, I'll keep trying to learn with this new software, see how things go. But, Gord, you've been amazing to hang out with as always, my brother. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This has been a lot of fun. This whole journey of going through these movies we haven't seen. This is great.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. It's really good stuff. So look forward to talking in 2 weeks about Patton, and we'll start schedule. I guess we should also drop the hint. We talked about shoring up what we're going to do next time. So next time we're doing Patton. And 2 weeks later, we're going to watch a movie I haven't seen. I do think some of you folks might be surprised by this. I have not watched Scott Pilgrim. So the original Scott Pilgrim film will be coming after that. And then Gord, he shocked me. I circled this one. He's not seen Mary Poppins.
Nope.
Huh. Mary Poppins, Mary freaking Poppins, this crazy musical that I don't know. I don't know about like the Gord score on a film like that, but I feel like there's definitely Americana that's birthed out of that film. If that makes sense, like
Hmm.
it's an impactful film, if nothing else. Like it may not be, oh man, I can't wait to watch this again, but it's a film you can come away with going, oh man, I totally get why people love this movie, and I totally get why people love this movie. In 1960, I think is when it came out. Is right,
Hmm.
64, 1964, yeah, something like that. So yeah. So that'll be our schedule over the next 3 shows. Hopefully, you folks will be able to join us and have a good time hanging out with us. So, Gordon, my brother, hang in there, be blessed, folks. You take care. Talk to you guys tomorrow for another Friday podcast. I'll be here with Stone Cold Loki talking alien talk, alien versus aliens. Make sure you're subscribed. All stuff's in the description to connect with Gord. He's playing video games. He's doing reviews, and his Gord tier is must watch. You gotta go check out the Gord stuff. It's fantastic. So take care, folks. Till next time, I am Pops.